So I'm joined here in the studio by Joshua Leonard, actor. The film is Humpday. Comes out today in the Angelica, Friday, July 10. Thanks for joining us here on WKCR.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so just to give our audience who might not be aware about this film, just a little brief synopsis. What's the story about? What's the movie about?
Humpday is a movie about two straight guys, two ex-best friends from college who kind of through a circuitous course of events decide that it's a really great idea for them to get together and make a art film where they have sex with each other in order to try to get over their respective existential crisis that they're facing in their early 30s.
Mm-hmm. And your character is this beatnik character, right?
Are there beatniks anymore?
I don't know. How would you describe your character then?
Andrew, I think Andrew fancies himself maybe a lost beatnik, a world traveler and explorer. But I think as those of us who have hit our 30s realize what was really wonderful exploration in our late teens, early 20s becomes a little bit sadder once you start hitting the 30s, and the tenor becomes a little more desperate, and I think it becomes a bit harder to justify in terms of it becomes more running away than exploration. And I think that's kind of the place that he finds himself, when he shows back up on the doorstep of his best buddy, Ben from college, played by the amazing Mark Duplass, who's half the Duplass brothers who did Puffy Chair and Baghead. And, Ben's got a pretty great domestic life. He's got a wife. He's got a well-appointed house. He's got the right coffee table books. And, these guys pretty immediately, you get the sense that they're living on the hyperbolic extreme ends of the responsibility spectrum, but suffering, in their own ways from the same kind of human fear, which is, Ben's brand is that the rest of his life is galvanized before him, and he feels a little stuck in a domestic prison, and Andrew feels like he hasn't really accomplished anything, and that the disparity between who he actually is and who he sells himself as has become a little too far to front anymore.
So they're at this party.
Mm-hmm.
They've had a couple drinks, smoked a couple J's, right? And they're there. They have this idea. They hear about Humpfest, this artsy porn film festival.
Which actually does happen.
Really?
Hump is actually a amateur porn competition that The Stranger, which is the weekly newspaper in Seattle, puts on. And it started out very small and kind of a marginalized community, and now I guess it's huge. I haven't been, but couples and individuals from all over Seattle get together and make their own porn films, and they have public screenings, and then they burn the tapes afterwards. And
really,
I guess it's pretty liberating and intense.
That's definitely an interesting twist. But I really want to tackle this basic premise,
mm-hmm.
because I personally had trouble with it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really think that this is a plausible premise, that two straight men would really have this idea and realistically say, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to have sex with each other. We can do this?
Well, I guess what I can tell you honestly is that my reaction when Lynn and Mark came to me with the idea was exactly yours. Was how is that viable? And I think if you look, if you look at the stuff that some of us have made before, it was pretty obvious that none of us wanted to make a farce. So the challenge then became to reverse engineer this very absurd kind of dumb high concept piece about these two, moronic dudes who kind of A-type macho themselves into a corner because neither one wants to back down off of having sex with the other into something really human and relatable. So I think we approached it with the same skepticism that we knew the audience would approach it with, and tried to respect that with the same amount of skepticism that we would have as audience members. So I welcome anybody to come watch the movie with that skepticism, because a lot of what we've gotten as our festival run has gone on is people coming up saying exactly that. I walked in thinking this was going to be kind of a one-liner that played out for way too long, and I saw how it could really happen, including straight guys.
Let's talk a little bit about how the movie was made. There's no writer credited, correct?
I don't know if I think Lynn took a credit. She came up with the original idea, and then she brought it to Mark. Mark brought it to me, and when we all started the journey together, it was a one-line pitch: two straight guys trying to make a gay porn, and we started chatting to try to figure out what, who the characters were going to be and what the journey of the film was going to be, and so I chatted. Lynn came down from Seattle. Mark and I both live in Los Angeles. She lives up in Seattle. She came down for a weekend. We put our heads together. It became pretty readily apparent that we had a good rapport with each other. There was no BS. There was no ego. It was kind of the best idea was always going to win, no matter whose it was. And from those conversations, we came up with a very detailed scene structure outline. So we knew the general arc of the movie, and then the individual beats that would comprise it. And then when we got on set, it was all improvised, because we knew propulsively what we had to do to keep the story going, and partially because, Mark and I are, I think, both actors who like to do that. We've both written and directed stuff, and that's a little more appealing than, having important, the important tear moment or the important monologue about something completely self-centered. I think the getting together and trying to tell this story in an interesting way was where we were all coming from. So we knew what we were doing, save for the last scene. And the last scene is where these two guys have really put all the energy of the preceding days into this art project that they're going to do. And they show up in a hotel room with nothing to do but try to accomplish this project, which is having sex with each other on film. And we decided that we weren't going to hypothesize on that scene at all, because we didn't want to. We shot the film in sequence, and we didn't want to angle towards anything. So we walked in, we checked into a hotel, we shot for 12 hours, we checked out the next morning, and came up with the end of the film pretty much on the fly.
So going into this movie, you have this idea: two straight guys having sex on film, right? But with no idea as to whether or not they're going to accomplish this act.
We just know they're going to try.
You just know that they're going to try. So, I mean, was there ever any, idea in your head like, yes, let's get the Vaseline and do this?
I don't want to reveal the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
There were no specific talks about Vaseline. That I remember for sure. But, I guess it was improv. We were both really in the moment. I guess we just figured we'd raw dog it if we got there.
Great use of terms right there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this making, this outline. Had you worked in this way before as an actor? Had you done films where you were doing this much improvising?
I have done some films where I improvised in. My first film was that film, The Blair Witch Project, which came out almost exactly 10 years ago, actually. And that was an entirely improvised film. And when I get to, it's certainly my favorite way to work. But that said, I'll add the caveat that you got to be doing it with the right people, and this was certainly, a group of people. Mark's not only a tremendous actor, but a really smart guy, and so the challenge, when you're improvising, you keep a couple of hand grenades, psychic hand grenades in your back pocket to toss at the other guy to see how they react, and he's really good at that. So it becomes a bit of mental chess when you're actually doing it, which is a lot more fun than 20 takes in a row of scratching your head in the right 45-degree angle. So so the camera catches it, so you can add that piece to the story. This was a completely process-based film that was made with a group of friends for practically no money, and it was a situation where we were gonna succeed or fail, but we were gonna do it completely on our own terms. There was nobody watching over our shoulder. So the fact that we made a film that I think we're all pretty proud of, and the fact that now it's got audiences responding to it too, has been just a win all the way around.
If I may, let's talk a little bit about your personal life.
Sure. How personal?
Pretty personal, if that's all right. You can just stop me or say I'm not going to answer that question. But you grew up very involved, well, at least your parents were very involved in the theater, right? Mm-hmm. And you did actually spend some time doing humanitarian work in Mexico.
I did.
And your character actually spent some time doing humanitarian artwork in Mexico. Mm-hmm. I know, without going into details, that you've had some history with drug use. You have a lot of tattoos. You certainly strike me as a very laid-back, bohemian-esque character, if I may. I'm just wondering, how much of you is in this film? Considering that you're ad-libbing all these lines, and you seem very much like the character.
Well, I think. Thank you, I guess. I guess that wasn't really a compliment. I think when you're improvising, that, or I should make this about myself. When I'm improvising, I don't want to map out a character that's too far out of my emotional spectrum, or kind of the given circumstances of my own life, because when you're moving quickly and you got to think on your feet and you got to write spontaneously, you don't want to be reaching for somebody else's life entirely. So I absolutely pulled aspects of myself. Now, with some of the desperation and the fallibility of the character and the brand of fears that he's having, I would like to at least think that some of that stuff is from pretty deep in my past. The fact is, look, I'm a homeowner. I have a mortgage. I'm in a monogamous relationship. I pay taxes. I've been working in the film industry for 15 years. That specific Andrew's given circumstance of feeling like he's never actually completed anything is not something that necessarily plagues me day to day. So I think I pulled stuff that I could certainly relate to. Some of it's stuff I still grapple with. Some of it's old. Some of it was from friends. It was really an amalgamation to try to not make him the cookie cutter, two-dimensional, like wild and crazy friend who shows up on the doorstep one night and everything goes awry. And, I think with Mark also, look, Mark is married and had a kid, and that was part of what was appealing to him in terms of playing the more domesticated character. Mm-hmm. But if you knew both of us because we're friends in real life, we hang out, I think we're both those characters, as I said before, were placed on opposite ends of the responsibility spectrum because it makes for good cinema. Because it's funnier to watch The Odd Couple than it is, two middle-class white guys with kind of boring jobs duking it out. There's just it made for a more dynamic conflict, I think. But in reality, we're both pretty type A in our own ways, and I think we both fall somewhere in the center of where those two characters are.
Now, as you mentioned, you and Mark are friends in real life, and I think that comes out on the screen as you guys have this really natural rapport. You're very, very comfortable with each other. Do you think you could have? How do you think the movie would have been if it had been like, hey, meet Mark, and you had never met him before, and it was this complete stranger? Would you have been able to achieve this closeness?
I don't know. It's certainly, making a movie like this, you cannot show up on set and try to create a history together, because whatever actually made it onto screen, there were 4 months of conversations preceding that shoot to at least create a phantom history. So when I said, to him, remember the time that we did the heroic dose of mushrooms at Snoqualmie Falls, he would remember exactly what preceded that, what came after that, what that represented in our lives. And I think in order to do something not scripted, you have to have those touchstones between you. That said, Alicia Delmore, who plays Anna, Mark's wife in the movie, I met her the first day that we were shooting. She had a couple conversations with Mark and had a real history with Lynn Shelton, our director. They had done a film together previously, and she's maybe my favorite part of the movie. She's so three-dimensional, and you so believe the relationship between the two of them, and she's not a harpy, and she's not a wilting flower, and she doesn't fall into any of those cliches, and so I guess in terms of that relationship, she was somebody that I met on the fly, and I certainly don't think you can tell from watching the film.
Well, in the film, you also meet Anna, on that first day. So it's, again, kind of a similar parallel.
It plays in. I mean, there was, there's quick reference to the fact that I had met her at the wedding, and
oh, right.
And then the backstory of that was I met her at the wedding, but then maybe ran away with one of her bridesmaids to Vegas in the middle of the night, and so she's not too thrilled with Andrew. Andrew's not one of her favorites in terms of her husband's friend. So she does pose a real threat. So I think that tentative quality between the two of us, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that plays. We didn't want there to be too much comfort there.
Okay. This movie, a lot of people call it Mumblecore.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just maybe, I know it's not quite your expertise, not a film theorist but an actor, but can you talk a little bit about what Mumblecore is and how this plays into that?
I actually was a film theorist.
Oh, excuse me.
Years.
I'm sorry.
Right before my microbiology career, I spent a couple years as a film theorist.
You and Andrew Saris.
In Dubai. I think Mumblecore is I don't think anybody who gets dubbed as Mumblecore really takes umbrage to the term. That said, it's a bit of a media construct.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way to.
Thank you.
Well, hey, you didn't make it up, man. Not personally slamming you. I'm just saying, sometimes it is the media's job to quantify, occasionally in a reductive manner. Sometimes, but in this case, for a greater purpose, which was, giving this group of filmmakers who just happened to be making a film in a similar vernacular, which I actually think was probably far more technology-based than it was ethos-based, because, you know, the technology had caught up to the time where you could make a movie that was watchable on your video camera about you and your friends, and you know, you didn't have to have a big budget. You could kind of, and so in terms of us generationally, where we're at, you know, there was no manifesto. You know, Joe Swanberg didn't call up Mark Duplass and say, like, hey, we've got a movement. You know, he was just making movies about his friends. Mark was making movies about his friends. You know, Bujalski was making movies about his friends. And, you know, most of us are white guys in our late 20s and 30s, or gals. And so, you know, there are going to be parallels there. And where I think it's great is that it brings attention to tiny movies. You know, you put a term on it, David Denby writes an article about it, and all of a sudden people are paying attention to these minuscule movies that might have otherwise come and gone without any notice whatsoever in, you know, in the more mainstream world. And I think, you know, we'll never be in direct competition. There will always be a place for independent film. But even in the last 12, 13 years that I've been pretty involved in the community, you know, the distribution channels have slimmed to nil. Maybe VOD is going to take over that. You know, probably the internet will save us in some ways. But I think for those of us who grew up watching movies and like to go to the theater, it's really hard to compete anymore. I mean, you know, it's impossible to compete against a studio P&A budget where they'll spend 3 times as much on marketing a film as they will on the film itself. And so any angle or hook that a little movie can get, using whatever kind of, you know, using the punk rock template of, you know, whatever the new form of zines are, or, you know, using the internet to kind of get it out there in a grassroots way, unifying it and helping each other, and the cross promotion. And, you know, I think you got to do it, because, you know, otherwise it's not a viable career path.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Definitely a case stated right there. What are you hoping, you know, that people are really going to take away from this movie? You know, and what do you think people have been taking away from this movie? Like you said, people are coming in there with certain expectations. They're walking out with kind of those expectations turned around a bit. So, I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, this deep world-changing film, but what do you kind of hope is going to shift through this film?
Well, I think that, you know, if I was a child in Darfur and I saw this movie, look, as Mark has been known to say before about his films, if you're going to make another movie about middle-class white people, you better go deep. And so I think we've at least tried to do that with this movie. That said, it's damn funny. So my hope is that an audience can have whatever experience they want out of it. And you can sit there and you can watch it, and you can kind of watch these two guys being moronic and ego-driven and doing really doofusy things, and laugh at them, because we have tossed that out on the table to be picked at and made fun of. So I think that's all there. I think I do think, though, that the movie does speak to a deeper thing, and if you want to have that experience, it's you know, I believe at its core it's a movie about friendship. It's a movie about self-identity, trying to figure out who you are, and you know, a bit of what it means to be a man in 2009 without getting too deep into the sexual politics of it. So I think, and and where I think Lynn is really great is she really loves her characters, warts and all. And when her and Nat Sanders took the footage that we filmed and went in to edit it, I think they let these people, these guys, really breathe and fail and try and love each other in a really three-dimensional way, and so it's wonderful because we do these Q&As and I think because we expose pretty intimate facets of our own fears and our own fallibilities, I think it kind of welcomes people to do the same. So it's one of those things that just cuts through the BS of pleasantries, and people get to talk about stuff that really matters to them, and really keeps them up at night, and they get to laugh too. And so if it inspires a couple of cool conversations where people get honest with themselves or with their mates or, their bros about who they are and where they feel like, they're a bit full of it, then that's fantastic. I hope for that. Certainly, art that's affected me in the past has done that very thing.
Okay, well, I guess my last question then is, I'd be neglected if I didn't mention that 10 years ago was Blair Witch Project, which kind of really brought you to stardom. And now you've got
for 6 minutes.
Now you've got a Humpday, which is getting crazy awards at Sundance and stuff like that. A lot of great press. So what do you got lined up next? I adapted a T.C. Boyle story called The Lie from the New Yorker. We're going to do it micro budget. Very cool.
End of the summer, about a guy who doesn't want to go to work and panics when he calls up to take a sick day and realizes he's used up all his sick days and lies and says that his newborn baby has just died.
Oh God.
So another crowd pleaser. And then next fall I'm directing a film that I wrote called Everything's All Right, which is a bit bigger and has a couple famous people in it, and that takes place in LA, and that's another kind of somewhere between a dark comedy and a drama about four people who have each done one thing that they can never forgive themselves for. So
very cool. So really moving on to the director's
lots of feminine introspection.
Very cool. Are you acting in any of these?
I'm going to act and produce The Lie,
wow.
the next one, and then will not be anywhere near the front of the camera for the one after that.
So just directing.
Exactly.
So a little bit of a switch.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we'll look out for that. Movies Humpday came out today. It's at the Angelica, and national release to follow. So Joshua Leonard, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All mine.